evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mahoning Drive-In Theatre, the largest single-screen drive-in in the United States. We're certainly glad you could be with us this evening, and don't forget the concession stand is open with all kinds of great things to eat and drink.
89.3 Mahoning Drive-In Radio, your old friend Virgil back once again for another exciting episode of the podcast. As you guys know, the only podcast dedicated to the love and revival of our beloved drive-in culture. Joined as always by my co-host and general manager extraordinaire, Mark. Say hello, my friend.
Hello.
And we are gearing up, revving the engine for the road show to kick off. And this year, we are doing it in a big, bad way with 10 dates spanning across several states, taking our love of 35 millimeter and our passion for the preservation of the drive-in culture to indoor houses. And we have been so lucky to connect with these indoor houses, but even luckier when it's with some personal friends of ours and longtime companions. And that's the case with the Colonial Theatre. You guys know them. You love them. The home of BLOB Fest. And we are partnering with them on February 20th for a double feature from a drive-in heaven, Dress to Kill, and ALLIGATOR on 35 millimeter, making this all happen and a lot of the magic happen at the Colonial. Welcome the great Bob Trate, Director of Programming at the Colonial. Welcome, my friend.
Hello, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. I don't think I've been introduced in such a way before. So that
well,
was nice.
It's so true. Like, the whole idea of this roadshow is to expand our network, the supporters of 35 millimeter, connect with those houses. But with you guys, we've had partnerships in the past. We've worked together in the past. Our fan bases cross over in such a way that it really is one and the same, I think, a Mahoning fan and a Colonial fan.
It's very true. And I've said that to numerous staff members. I said, look, Mahoning shirt, Mahoning hoodie, Mahoning hat. And then when I'm up there, I see Blobfest t-shirts and Colonial hoodies and all that kind of stuff. So it's like a mutual thing. And I made a joke to my wife. I'm like, I'm going to go talk to the crazy cousins who are driving guys. So I was like,
those backwoods cousins. Yeah.
I wouldn't even say backwoods cousin, just crazy. I've
Nice.
had crazy cousins. So I think of you guys in that way, and that we're all, intermixed in some way. We have a lot of crossover artists and fans and friends. And, my wife and I, we look at the schedule all the time and try to figure out, what can we get to? What can we come up and see? And then I've got it, well, that's the same weekend. We've got this down here. So,
I know, it's always the hardest part.
It's the hardest part. And one of the best things that that I think that came out of the pandemic was that when Exhum's 24-hour was actually in November, and then I got to see all you guys.
That's right. That was the best. It
was great, and it was fantastic. And I wish, in some ways that could always happen. And then you guys would get you guys get a whole day at our place, and that would just be fantastic. But I understand why it's in October and all that other fun stuff. But that was just great. And that was one of the podcasts of yours that I listened to. I wanted to hear your experience.
One of our most popular podcasts. People love that.
Oh, good.
Podcast.
Good. Yeah. I really enjoyed hearing Rob talk about working on our projectors and how sharp they were and clean and all that other kind of stuff. So it was nice to have a different perspective from you guys. So that was great.
Well, that's kind of a good segue. So the whole criteria with the road show is that it has to be an indoor house that runs 35 millimeter. Can you give us a little bit of history on how you guys have been able to preserve 35 millimeter in your theater?
Well, when I got involved with the Colonial around 2007, we still had 35 as our major outlet to show films. And there was always talk of we were going to get a DCP projector. And eventually in 2009, we did. And we kind of had a switch over. We were able to run newer things. And as you guys know, the studio stopped making 35. But there was, a lot of the horror films exist on 35 millimeter, and it's amazing. So when I founded the Fright Night that we started there, and it really caught on, it was just so much easier to get a Fright Night film that would be 35 and run that, and the attendance was always better. every once in a while the studios would be like, oh, we have this at DCP, and you're like, no, it's okay. We really want a 35 millimeter thing.
Talking them into it, yeah.
And it just became a thing that we would constantly run, and then eventually, the Fright Night and then our Cult series, that was the only way we could do that. That was the only thing we really did with our 35. So it for a while there, we had a bit of a lull. We weren't really doing them. We were getting DCPs and stuff, and the attendance dropped. But it's nice every once in a while. Like, we did that thing you do on 35 millimeter.
Come on.
And it's the only way you can get it. It's ridiculous. It's a Tom Hanks movie. It's a feel-good movie. Yeah. And it's got a great soundtrack. And Disney only has it as 35. And
that is nuts.
You're like, why? It doesn't make any sense. So it's fun every once in a while when, like, another member of the staff, or we get a recommendation from somebody and says, hey, we'd really like to do this. And you're like, and we find out it only exists on 35 millimeter. And you're like, wow, we are in the 2% of the country that still can project 35. You guys are in that lot too. Yeah. But we are in the 17, I think it is, in Pennsylvania, that can actually show 35 millimeter.
Amazing.
So now it's this, every once in a while, it becomes this big, like, hey, we can do that. Like, we can actually show that. We showed Enemy Mine last year for Lou Gossett Jr. in tribute to him, only on 35.
Amazing.
And, they were like, well, why don't you just, DCP? And I'm like, no, like, it doesn't exist. One, yes, it'll be cheaper, but here's a chance to actually show something that nobody else is going to show who doesn't have a 35 millimeter projector.
Yeah, if you're going to see Enemy Mine, like, that's the way you want to go see
exactly.
it. 35 millimeter projection. Well, that seems to be the case with the theaters that we're working with. Is, it's a beautiful tool that they now have been able to preserve. Some of them use it more than others, but it's beautiful what you guys have been able to do, which is really, like us, kind of feed the 35 millimeter fans.
Right. And I try to do it as much as I can. It's always cost effective for us. Like, we had a copy of Donnie Darko that cost way too much money to ship to us.
Yeah.
And they even shipped us the wrong version. They were supposed to ship us the director's cut, and it wasn't. And I was like, oh my God. And then what we paid. So thankfully we were able to kind of talk ourselves down a little bit on the shipping costs, because they sent us the wrong movie. Yeah. And it's just one of those things where you're like, one thing I wanted to do was, and you guys did a great job with Friday the 13th, where you ran them all weekend. I wanted to do the Tommy Jarvis trilogy. What is like, was it 4? Is it 5, 6, and 7, or 4, 5, and 6? I don't have that much of a street cred of Friday 13th to know it, but I wanted to do all 3 of those. And I was at like $2,000 or $3,000 with shipping costs, getting prints, and it was like ridiculous. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to make any money off of this.
Yeah.
But it's like, you want to do those really cool events on all 35. Like, I hunted. There was a 135 millimeter print of one of the Halloweens. I think it was like 6 or 7. I forget. It might have been the one that Paul Rudd was in. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's 6. That's a hard one to find.
Yeah, it was a producer's cut. So I'm like Indiana Jones, like trying to tracking this thing, where it went from theater to theater. And then they're like, yeah, it's gone. And you're like, let alone just trying to find the rights, like who had it, Paramount, or, where did the Miramax sell it to, or the Weinsteins, or whoever.
Such a juggle.
And you're like, did the print just disappear? And they're like, yeah, we don't know what happened to it. And you're just like, how can you lose 80 pounds?
I know. It seems to happen so often. Like I was saying to Mark, even before you came on, like, things we were able to get, even 3 years ago, all of a sudden studios don't have it, and we got to go dig through private collectors, and it's becoming a harder thing to be able to maintain and pull off all the time.
Yeah, and you want to do all that fun stuff, and you get the what was it? One of Jesse Crooks. I don't know if you guys know him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, well, Jesse once sent me a meme of Grandpa Simpson shaking his fist in the air, and he was like, "Those are the guys who just think that everything should be on 35 millimeter. Like, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Like, I can't show that movie in 35 as much as you think it's going to look great. It doesn't exist anymore. Like, it's so weird to tell people.
That's the hard part,
Ooh.
Well, your run at the Colonial, incredibly impressive. You said you started in 2007. What was your position when you came in, and how did you come to be the program director?
in 2007, I had been coming to the Colonial on and off for a couple of years. I lived right down the street. I'd walk in, spend a Sunday there, watch a movie. And I went in and I said, look, I'd like to volunteer, but I just don't want to tear tickets. Like, that's not my thing. Like, I don't mind doing the work. I'll do the work if you want to, but I really just want to introduce the movie and just talk about it, you know. And it was coming up on Audrey Hepburn month in January. And they said, it's Audrey Hepburn month and you have these 4 films and you'll introduce them. So I'm like, okay, great. So I like bought a ticket and I would get up there and talk about Charade and My Fair Lady. And, you know, I'd never seen, I think I hadn't seen either one. So I was getting up there talking about the movie and facts, who was president at the time, what other movies came out. And then they caught wind that I was buying my own ticket. And they said, no, you're volunteering. You don't do that. I'm like, all right. So then I started help cleaning up and things. And they put me on the classic film committee. And I was the youngest person at 35, I believe I was at the time. The youngest person on that committee at 35. And I listened and I kind of got a first gist of how things worked there. And in the second round of, this was the next 6 months they were picking, I laid out like what I thought would be like, you know, these are some good choices. They picked everything I had on that list. Like I literally laid out 6 months and I was like, nobody, these guys who have been on this committee since like the day it was founded in 1999 were like, oh yeah, this. So I got a little, you know, more gusto. The third time around, we had our next meeting and I had A Clockwork Orange on there and I had The Thing. And these guys were older. They were at least late 40s, early 50s, if not over that for sure. And the one guy said, The Thing is not a classic. And I go, it's from 1982. What are you talking about? Now, granted, this is like, it's 2008. And I said, yeah, it's a classic. I said, that's a great movie. And they said, Clockwork Orange? And I said, well, that's from the late 60s, you know? And they're like, yeah, I don't think so. Like, yeah, I don't know. I'll come back to that guy later. Okay. His name was Lee. I'll come back to Lee later. And so I went up to the executive director at the time, Mary Foote, and I wrote her an entire proposal. And I said, look, there is an audience here in Phoenixville and the surrounding area that'll come and watch horror movies. And The Thing, A Clockwork Orange, and I said, let's do them on Friday night. You guys have nothing going on Friday night. They closed the streets down on this was just on Friday. They closed the streets down, and that all those people, they either go to the bar or they go home after whatever activity is. Let's have a horror movie, not at midnight, at like 9:45. You know, midnight's too late. Everybody passes out halfway through. Let's just do that. So she said, okay, let's do a couple of films and see how it goes. So we did 40 people for Return of the Living Dead. They thought that was great. 40 people to show up at 9:45 for Night of the Living Dead. Sorry, Night of the Living Dead.
Like we're on to something.
Yeah, they're like, okay, let's do it. So I did like another 8 or 9 months, Clockwork Orange, The Thing, Zombie. We did Blade Runner in there. And it was all Texas Chainsaw Massacre, all this stuff. And the audience came. And it came and it came and it came. So I was on that committee I was by myself programming Just a Fright Night, and I was helping out with the classics for years. And then other people came on, people like Chuck Francisco, Nick Lombardo, Joel Rickenbach. And then we made like a committee. And then I knew my limitations at that time for horror were so much. I had worked in like 5 video stores, but I was not raised on horror like so many other people were. Yeah. So, you know, we got through sometimes, come and go, people changed and things like that. I'll bring up that guy Lee. The guy Lee, years later, suggested Clockwork Orange is a Sunday classic. And like, I looked at him and I go, really? And he goes, oh yeah, it's coming up on its anniversary. We should really show it. And we all kind of, the Fright Night guys now, we're all on the classic film committee. And we all kind of just turned at him and go like, what? So we got up there. I think there was 3 of us there at the time. We all got up and we said, everybody, we know this is Sunday morning. This movie is rough. If you have never seen it, it's rough. Like, we will refund your money right now. And when we say rough, there's a rape scene in here. Okay. So Sunday morning rape scene, not something you probably want to see. Yeah. There was this old couple that came in. They always sat in the back. And as soon as they walked in, I came over to them and said, hi, folks. I said, you know what you're getting in for? And they're like, oh, of course. We've seen this before. So I was just like, all right. Lee never showed up.
A bit of the ultra violence. Let's go.
Yeah. Lee never came. It was his movie that he picked. And he didn't
Oh, my God.
And we got such flack for that. And we were like, it's Clockwork Orange. How do you not know what you're getting into at this point? Like, it was like the, I don't know, 30th or 40th anniversary or something like that. Yeah. And we're like, what? So during the pandemic, I was working for a toy website at the time. And I was never officially a staff member. I was just a long-term volunteer. I volunteered with BLOB Fest. I'd always been on the programming committees here and there. And then during the pandemic, they had let our director of programming go right about a year before the pandemic or so. And then during the pandemic, they had let go the marketing director. And I got a call from the executive director at the time during the pandemic. And he said, hey, are you interested in the marketing director position? I need someone who knows movies, and no one here on the staff knows movies like the way I know you know movies. Because I had come to him, I'd met him, he was the new executive director, and we had talked to him about programming and films and what we do and our experiences and how we grew this audience over time. And he said, please come in, let's have a talk. So we had some discussions and we had some talking. So they made me the marketing director at a time where we couldn't have more than like 12 people in the theater at a time.
The hardest time ever.
So you're like, oh my God. So because we also didn't have a programming director, I was doing double duty. So I was like looking at whatever new movie the studios would throw at us, because it was slim pickings. And repertory films, as you guys know, were dirt cheap. Like anything that the studios were throwing everything at us. I mean, I can't believe that I showed The Dark Knight for $125 for the week. Like we could just show The Dark Knight for that. We had something else like it was, what was it, Psycho or something like that for like $150. And you'll never see those prices again. But we had an amazing turnout, and the new movie did okay. We get a couple people interested here and there. We actually we had some sort of streaming deal with a couple of them that we would stream through our portal and things. But we were getting these, we came up with the idea to do private screenings. And you could rent the theater out. We had 3 different theaters, and then we would just rotate through DCP. And that was the great thing about DCP, was that we could just get the movie once and then bounce it between our 3 theaters and rent it out to a family who wanted to see Hocus Pocus, wanted to get out of the house, even though they had the movie, had Disney Plus, got out, got their popcorn and soda, no touch, didn't talk to anybody, just went right in. They had the theater for that time. So that really, really took off. That really helped save us. And I was able to see, learn more about the programming side of things, because I was seeing what things were costing. And,
what a great time to get into it. Yeah.
Yeah. You get the interactions of, with the studio and the booking agent and everything. And our booking agent was very gracious, and she was very nice, and even knew that I was the marketing director, but knew that I wasn't exactly the programming director. So she was, very helpful. And right about very close to the end of things for the pandemic. And this was somewhere in August of, I want to say 2022, maybe. It's so shady or hazy now. Yeah. The executive director who hired me left. He had one of those, awakenings during the pandemic and wanted to do something else with his life and focus his energies on other things. He was a lawyer. He wanted to help artists, be their representation, those kind of things. So we got a new interim executive director, and she was very much a bean counter in the right way. Like, money goes here, money goes there, who is doing what job, and looking at everything in an analytical way. And amazing the way she could see things. And she looked at me and she said, they had some meetings and discussions. She said, look, we're going to hire a new executive director, and everybody's saying the same thing. We don't have a programming director. She goes, I'm going to move you out of marketing into programming, and that's going to be your function.
Yes.
And that was it. So the funny thing was, for me, when I started volunteering way back in 2007, I was writing for a science fiction website called Mania, which used to be Cinescape magazine. I was going to Comic-Con. I was eventually became the news editor of that site. So, I never had, I was like, well, that'd be a cool job, but I never really thought that I would do it. And then eventually I was like, I could really do this job. This was, over time,
that's
I could
the
really
place
learn.
I want to be. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay. So I eventually got to that position in the weirdest, longest roundabout way possible, that I got the position because I was doing double duty, and they were like, the films and you know how this works. Yeah. And all those years writing reviews and working at video stores and going to Comic-Con and covering events, I never thought any of that would all lead to where I am now.
Yep.
I live three blocks from the theater. That's just the weirdest thing. So I became the director of programming. I've been there now. I'm going on year 5 with the theater as an official employee.
Yeah.
But it's funny because I'm on year 18. And, it was a great, weird internship volunteer thing where I was a volunteer at Blobfest. And then as the years went on, they started just eliminating people, streamlining it. And then I was one of the last 4 people standing who was a volunteer who was now on the committee for Blobfest, who was like making decisions. Artistic decisions, or, hey, I can film this and we can record that. We can make these ads and those kind of things. So then eventually when Blobfest is now like such a big thing, most people don't know this, but Blobfest was run by volunteers up until like 2022.
Yeah.
Where
like
it really
huge event for the area. Yeah.
It all became now part of the theater's identity, and the staff is all very much involved with it in every aspect. So now it's actually like this staff person handles this staff person handles that. So to actually go and see all of these things and the organic growth of Blobfest and how huge it's become, and it's fantastic. It's just great to see an event over 25 years, and I've only been with it, I think, since 2007. So to actually see it that long and see how it's grown and how fantastic it is and such a piece of our identity, it's great. But I've been there forever, and there's still times where I walk into a room downstairs, or we find a door that we didn't know existed, and I'm like, I've never been in this room. I've been in this room for 18 years, and I found the toilet in the projection room. I was working on we have like a hodgepodge of technology to make everything work. Yeah. And I'm like, what the hell is behind this door? And the old projectionist, who you guys will meet, his name's Ted the Fiddler. He's going to be doing your show. Yeah. He goes, oh, that's the old bathroom. I go, what's in there? And he goes, I don't know. I've been in there since 2009. And this was like 2 years ago. And I opened the door, and it's like all this white powder from the ceiling is all over everything, and it's all like negative cutters and rewinders and lenses. And we're like, oh my god. And there was one of those carousels for 35 millimeter slides, all that kind of stuff. So we had all those old ads on the 35 millimeter slide. We're like looking through all this shit, and I'm just like cleaning it out. And I'm like, I went in there with a vacuum cleaner and masks. Like, I wish I had a hazmat suit, because God knows what that stuff was in there. And then, what's his name? Michael Drumbor, one of your old projectionists. He said he'd actually, if we put a toilet back in there, he'd pay for the toilet as long as it was dedicated to him. So,
a little brass plaque on the back.
Yeah, I guess that's what he said. I thought that was hysterical, but I was like, no, because I'm using that for storage now of like 16 millimeter, because we put a new air conditioner in there and really cooled the room off. Because, we have now, our new problem this year is that our heat is not regulated. It's so cold outside that the building is overcompensating and making every room into a furnace, especially rooms that should not be, like our attic and our like theaters and stuff, which are pleasant at 68 degrees, but now are like 75, and people are like, oh my god, it's so hot in there. And
this is your opportunity to run Lawrence of Arabia in 4D.
There you go. There you go. And just sweat. We just hand water to every 1 cup or 1 sip or something like that. So it's there's always these new problems with this old building, but it's the crazy collection of technology. And literally talking to somebody who may have been a volunteer or who had worked there like 20 years ago, telling you, oh yeah, those heat ducts don't work, and like they're the only person that knew that, and thank God they walked in and said, why is it so cold in here? Like, well, we can't figure out how to turn on this heating duct.
Such a crossover.
Like, what are you talking about? Like, nobody made a note or left anything in there that just said, oh yeah, that doesn't work. So we have some crazy, it's just a crazy weird place at times. It's a lot of fun, but other times you're like, why didn't it work? Why doesn't it work?
I love the origin story, because it's one of those things when you're all trying to be inspired and listening to how people got to where they're being. Like, there really is this crossover with what we did with just giving yourself over to the experience and volunteering yourself and your time and everything else. And
Yeah.
naturally, like, the audience came along, supported you, you guys found your footing, and it all paid off. It's just so crazy. And I feel that crossover with taking the tools of all these jobs that you had leading up to the place that you're at and somehow realizing, oh my gosh, like, I never realized it at the time, but that was me sharpening this skill or sharpening this tool and taking it with you to the next venture.
It's so weird because, I never thought that I would host a Q&A where I work or any of those things. And yet I had sat through so many at Comic-Con, and I had talked to the press agents and those guys and got to be friends with them and stuff, and like watch them work over and like the same guy like 6 times. Like there's this guy in LA, his name's Gary Monroe, and I've watched him host dozens of DC Universe animated Batman panels. And I learned so much just from watching him. And it's like the craziest thing. You don't expect that you're going to need all those skills or you even have them. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, I know how to do this.
That muscle is there when you reach back. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so strange. Or like I did celebrity golf tournaments for a couple years. And then, all the things you have to learn about doing stuff with charity events and just always keeping a smile on your face,
Yes.
And you're like, because you never know who you're going to offend by just frowning.
The littlest gesture.
Yeah. The little thing like, oh my God, just keep smiling no matter what happens so nobody's mad at you.
Well, it's definitely a crossover as well with the history of the theater. How long has the Colonial been there physically?
We call our oldest theater the 1903 Theater in honor of that is when we believe the theater opened. Now, there was a big fire years and years ago in Chester County where we are that all the historical records were burned. So we've seen hints and indications that possibly we did open in 1902, but our best bet is 1903. So when the theater opened in 1903, we were a vaudeville theater, didn't show movies for a couple of years. Our first talkie was like 1915, but we had Houdini perform at the Colonial, and Mary Pickford and Charlie Chaplin were actually out front doing like a war bond kind of thing at the time. They didn't perform inside. Like we've actually figured that out. We thought they performed there, but then we actually found out later through some other people who are newspaper like archaeologists who try to dig up old newspapers and try to find those facts. And actually we found out that they were there on a war bond tour. And actually Chaplin's, which is in Royersford, which is the next city over, is where Chaplin actually did like a little like song and dance routine or something.
Yeah.
Not too far. So we've been around for a very long time. We bought the building next door, which used to be the Phoenixville Bank. It used to be the Phoenixville newspaper.
Yeah.
We bought that in 2009, but we had opened it in 2018 with 2 additional screens. So the nice thing about our theater was we weren't one of those theaters where somebody just cut the big theater in 2 and put up 2 screens. And
right.
You guys have been to those. I've been to those.
Oh, yeah.
And we never did that. So when we bought the building next door, it took, I think, about 9 years for it to be remodeled and reopened. So we do have 2 theaters. One is 151 seats, and those seats retract, so we can do all kinds of, like, we have a speakeasy, we have dances, we do all kinds of things in Theater 2. And then Theater 3 is like more like the lush producer Warner Brothers executive screening room kind of feel. Like we have 61 seats down there, and the sound quality down there is amazing because it's such a small space. So it hits you in the chest. I mean, all the sound is up to code. It's all like the best stuff. But we are in the process of getting a 4K projector for our Theater 1 because our Theater 3 projector failed over the summer, and they basically said they don't make parts for this anymore. Yeah. So we are like, what? So before our big Theater 1 projector goes down, we have a campaign going on right now, which is
going to get ahead of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got the campaign is up on our website. It's the Moving Pictures campaign, and we're trying to raise $50,000. We already have a donation of $50,000, but we have to match it. So we're somewhere around 17 or 18 as the recording of this. So we're working on it. We're trying to do it by World Theater Day on March 27th. But I literally got an email today from my booking agent. I'm trying to book Thunderball for the 60th anniversary, I think it is.
Yeah.
And the studio now says you have to project James Bond films in 4K.
Wow.
And I'm like, what? Like, and so hopefully I have the 4K projector, and I'm looking for it in June, but hopefully I'll be able to do that. But I was going to put it in the blue theater because there's a big underwater climax in that movie, and I thought it would look cool with all the blue, light and the water and everything.
Yeah.
And I thought, that'd be amazing. And then I'm like, what? It has to be in 4K? So if that's an indication of how things are going to go, great. Yeah. That means we're going to have to, not only now do we have to deal with Disney, it's 35 millimeter prints that are certified by Disney, or it has to be DCP. Like, they won't let you show a Blu-ray or a DVD or 16 millimeter or anything. So now if studios start following along the same lot, we're all going to have to jump to 4K for every projector that we have. That's ridiculous.
Crazy. Yeah, it's just that mandate that comes down from the top every now and then. We get the occasional, the director only allows it to be shown in a certain format, or circumstances like that create these hurdles,
There are times where, all of us have seen every version of Blade Runner, well, at least probably the three of us. But I really wanted for the 40th anniversary of Blade Runner to show the theatrical cut, and Ridley Scott's like, it's only the final cut.
Like, nope, sorry.
And you're like, but if it exists and I have it, and we've all seen it, and you're not selling it again to us, why can't we, the whole point of film, especially different versions, sorry, George Lucas, is that it exists in a different medium format. How did the film evolve? What is the final thing that you really wanted us to see, but where did that come from? How did we get to that point? That's what makes it so fascinating. We have different cuts of films that were theatrically released, we should be able to play.
You're dang right. Yeah, it's such a unique world and time that we're in with the digital age and everything kind of progressing. I mean, it's clear that you have such a love for movies. Where does this come from? Like, where does your love for cinema and, kind of pop culture come from?
Well, pop culture, I think it just came from because you love movies. That just all kind of feeds into itself. I always credit my father as someone who gave me my love of movies. And I always tell the joke that early on when I was little, you're grounded. Whatever I did, you're grounded. Oh, okay, no TV for a week. All right. Casablanca's on. You can watch Casablanca and that's it. So TV is TV to a kid. You're like, okay, I'm going to watch Casablanca. So I'm like 6 years old watching Casablanca, having no idea what's going on. Yeah. But it's like, this was the first time. So now I'm up to 300th time. And you fully understand the movie, you appreciate everything on every level, and you're 15. I understand Casablanca completely. I may be the only 15-year-old in my class who saw Casablanca. Same with The Adventures of Robin Hood with Errol Flynn, The Searchers, The Quiet Man. My dad loved John Ford, so, I saw a lot of John Ford movies. But if we were grounded and this movie at this time was on, this was the opportunity that my dad actually had to show us a piece of cinema.
That's amazing.
It wasn't like now where it's like, okay, kids, come into the room. Tonight, we are going to watch this movie because I got, we have the streaming service and, we're going to watch it. Yeah, it's not queued up. It's on now. We're going to watch it now. My dad got a VCR and recorded Casablanca and Robin Hood, but only halfway through. So for me, Robin Hood always starts with Maid Marian in Sherwood Forest as they're walking. I never knew what was at the beginning of the movie until years later when my dad got a Blockbuster card and went and actually rented it. Same with Casablanca. I thought Casablanca started right before the montage. So these films are always different for me because it's always, they're much longer than this.
Just remember them from the cable, taped off TV era. Yeah.
So my dad was very much about movies, and we never had I'm not a kid who grew up with my parents were not hippies. My dad was he was on the college patrol, campus police kind of guy. So he was always at concerts, but he was always working them. He was never he was at the Isaac Hayes concert at Penn State, working it, protecting Isaac Hayes, not actually listening. Right. So I never grew up with music, but it was always movie music. It was scores. soundtracks, all that kind of stuff. Star Wars, Rocky, Superman.
Yeah.
So I'm a child of Star Wars, and that was our thing. Like the family all went to see Star Wars, all went to see Indiana Jones. These were things up until about, I remember Hook being the movie where I was like, boy, I don't really like that. Like that kind of stunk. And I wanted to start seeing, I'm not a fan of Hook. I've come to appreciate it, but I'm not a fan of Hook.
Yeah.
And I kind of like, I want to go see this instead. Like I really wanted to go see, I think it was something like Lawnmower Man or something like that. And my dad was like, I'm not taking you to see Lawnmower Man. And I was fascinated with the, the special effects and the virtual reality and all that other kind of thing. So I was starting to like branch out and reach like, this is what I wanted to see.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see this. And then thankfully I lived near a mall that I could walk to the movie theater. So that became like a good first step. And then I was starting to realize, boy, that movie did suck. Like Lawnmower.
You start creating your own opinion. You could be
so you're starting to think about, what did the trailer tell me? How did it lie to me?
Yes.
So that's one of the amazing things that, I love trailers. I love watching these things. My mom would drop me off. I remember seeing like The Last Starfighter with me and my brother and my best friend. And she just dropped us off. And I'm like, what? Like, see you guys. I'll be back, in 2 hours, So you get to that point where they start dropping you off and then you start having your own opinion. And then I was fortunate enough to actually fall into a theater class instead of a movie class when I was in high school. The movie class did not have enough kids, enough guys or girls that wanted to be in the movie class. So they canceled the class. And I was very upset by this because this was like, oh my God, you get to make a film, on video.
This is my class.
This is the class that I want. And then my guidance counselor told me, she's like, yeah, they canceled it. So you're going to have to take something else. So I was like, what else is there? And like, well, there's TV media, which eventually I did take, but they're like, there's theater. And I was like, all right. So I took this theater class, and there was this guy in this class who was a year older than me that I had never seen before. Older kid. He's not going to talk to me because he's trying to meet girls and all this other stuff. And we're getting ready for this play and everything. And he brought all this music in as we're building the set. And I'm like, oh, Back to the Future 2, Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark. He's going down. He's like, do you like soundtracks? And I'm like, yeah. And these are all on cassette tape. This tells you how long ago it was. I'm like, yeah, I love soundtracks. And he goes, oh. So then we start talking. And to this day, he and I are still friends. Like we see each other every week. He is an actor in LA. And we've made a couple of films together. We've done tons of skits together. But he was my first, like, oh my God, there's other people like me who love movies. Like he
lit that fire. Yeah.
He had me over to his house and he was like, hey, we're going to watch. My dad and I are going to watch Jaws. You want to come over? And I go, I've never seen it. And I go, I've been told it's kind of scary. And he's like, oh, yeah, but it's really funny. And I'm like, it is, And so I came over to his house, and just to hear his dad and him laugh at all the more human moments made me start to realize like, oh, there's a little bit more to this than just these jump scares. And so him and his dad were another person that showed me movies that my parents never would have watched or never would have seen. So that was another, like, expanding my palette, becoming more and more like film aware, and then how people can have different tastes. People can enjoy different films.
Those key moments that hit you,
Yeah. It really like opened my mind to like, I got to see more. I'm not seeing enough, what's on cable, what my parents bring home. Every once in a while you get a pick, it's not really, you're trying to judge the box.
You got to play it safe. Yeah.
You can't get the movie you really want to get because your mom's not going to let you rent it. So I will say, to my mom's credit, my mom let me rent Predator whenever I wanted, Die Hard whenever I wanted, and Big Trouble in Little China whenever I wanted.
That's awesome.
For my brother and I, those were the 3 movies that usually we're having sleepovers, friends coming over. It was one of those 3, if not all 3. Yeah. So, and that was always my mom. She was always like, all right, whatever. You want Predator? Sure. You want to take Predator? Sure. Take Predator.
The kid likes it. Let him enjoy it.
Yeah, let him enjoy it. That's fine, whatever. I'm like, okay, this woman should not have done that at times, but I always think it was great. So my dad told me to go work at a video store up the street, and literally took me in there, and he went up to the owner or the manager, and he was like, my son wants to work here. And they're like, oh, really? What's your favorite movie? And I'm just like, I think I said Casablanca or something like that. And the guy like freaked out, and he was like, oh, okay. Well, how old are you? And I'm like, well, I'm 17, and, filled out the form and everything. And then I was taking home 6 movies a night.
Yeah.
I would work at West Coast. So it was like, and we had porn too. So that was a whole other world that I was not ready
so
for.
5 movies in one porn.
But no, it was like, you didn't want to touch them. You saw those guys.
Yes.
They were never rewound. It was always one of those weird things.
I was always so envious of the West Coast crew. I was a Hollywood video guy.
I was one of those guys too. So
yeah, it was one of those things where it's like I would go over there occasionally and be like perusing, getting jealous of the things that they had. You know?
Oh man, it was the worst. And then it was this kind of reverse sexism that if you worked with a woman, she didn't put the porn away. You had to put the porn away, which I thought was fair. But it was like, well, we're closed. Why am I still putting away the porn?
It's
I don't
on
want
you.
to see Battlestar Orgasmia and Bone Alone. Those are 2 real titles, by the way. And you're like, I don't want to put these away. So please put them away. And you're just like, oh my God, I wish we had hand sanitizer back in those days. But we had the beaded curtain and everything, and the little video monitor that we could watch the guys back there. Oh my God.
You are so like in the same wavelength as Mark and myself, like the product of the cable era, the video store era, the repertory $1.25 theaters, it is that type of stuff that just like informs and creates a movie fiend.
Yeah, it is. And I can honestly say I am blessed that my wife is the exact same way. Now she worked at, I think, just a Blockbuster, but she is obsessed with films. And what's great is that usually if there's a trivia night, we have to be on separate sides because people know there's no way they're going to beat the two of us.
That's a shoo-in.
Unless, and she's like, I don't think we should be on opposite sides because we'll just fight, or they'll wait to say, well, if Bob has 2 or 3 beers, he's not as sharp. So it's okay that if he's on the same sides as her. So I'm blessed to have that in my life, that my wife and I both love movies. And we bought a book a couple years ago. It was 1,000 movies you have to see before you die. Yes. So I'm at like number 300. Haven't seen it yet. I'm writing them down. She's at 3 that she hasn't seen yet. And I'm like, what do you mean 3? And she's like, oh yeah, I've seen all the ones that you're writing down. And I'm like, what? And she goes, yeah, I don't sleep. I just watch Netflix all the time, and all these other things. So it's nice to have that other person with me who I can always say, hey, did you ever see that? And she'll give me like the full, like, and I think you should watch it. Or she's like, just stay away from it. Like, it's not really worth seeing. So it's always fun. Like we just did a full, we did Shudder's, like the Japanese horror movies or something like that.
Yeah.
And she saw like all of them. And I'm just like, oh, but she goes, well, we shouldn't watch that one late at night because it's really slow. Or, like, oh yeah, that's one I don't want to watch with you. You can watch it.
Like I married a movie critic.
I've seen it and I don't need to ever see it again. Like it's unsettling. And I'm like, oh, geez, but you should see it once. And I'm like, oh, okay. So
I just love it's like so destined. Like the path is, like you said, led to this in a weird way,
Yeah, it's very strange, and I'm very fortunate to have a father who was very much like, hey, let's do movie night. You're grounded, but we'll do movies. You got to watch this. And then I made one friend who then opened the door up to like 4 or 5 other guys that became the summer movie crew. Like you're like, oh, we're going to see Jurassic Park this week, and then next week it's going to be this one, and then this week's going to be this one. Like, and it was an event. We made it an event every
What a time
week.
to be alive.
Oh my God, like summer 90, like 3, 4, 5. I mean, it was so, we were going to see things like Bridges of Madison County just because we had the time, the money, and just like,
freedom.
Let's go see another movie.
I know.
The freedom. That's it. It's just like, what'd you do today? We saw Judge Dredd and Bridges of Madison County. There's a double feature for you. I'm not
what we did before the internet.
Yeah, exactly.
Trolls,
So now we seek out all those crazy things, every once in a while if we can do them together. And being in LA with my friend, his name is Sean. I was in LA with him for a year, and it was like going to the Egyptian, going to the New Beverly, going to the Arrow, and seeing crazy shit that you don't see here on the East Coast. But on the West Coast, it's like we went to see a double feature of used cars and car wash.
Come on.
And Bob Gale was there to talk about used cars beforehand, and you're not going to, you don't get that out here. And the ticket was still like $10, like out here, that would have been a $30 ticket, to have Bob Gale like talk about the movie beforehand. But there it was like $10, you go in and there's Danny Elfman talking about working with Tim Burton in front of Edward Scissorhands. So you know, when you guys put on these events, I really, I know your patrons are really appreciative, but you've got to really like enjoy the fact of what you guys do and bringing these people here. You bring that little bit of Hollywood to, you know, the area. You know, we try to do it as much as we can, but you know, some of these actors and these actresses, these directors, these writers that we get to come in here and talk to our patrons, like we hope that spreads the love of cinema and they get that little piece, that story to tell to everybody that we do this really
people
cool thing.
love it. It's that fandom, you know, like I think back to, you know, again, when we were younger and in that mode of like going to repertory theaters, if I had the opportunity to go and meet some of these filmmakers and talent that comes through the area now, like it would have been tenfold, this spark of creativity that it's set off in us, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I got to ask, naturally, we are the Drive-In podcast. You seem to have had a very lucky, fruitful movie life. Were you lucky enough to have a drive-in experience when you were younger? And if not, when did that come?
I remember my parents had like the green station wagon from Vacation.
Yeah.
Family truckster. Yeah, the family truckster.
Got that wood panel.
Think you hate it now. Wait till you drive it. I remember my parents taking us to see Star Wars in that, and they had that little seat thing that would flip up in the back. So I remember going to see Star Wars way back when, and God knows when that was because it played forever, you know, when it first came out.
Yeah.
But I don't remember really going to the drive-in after that until I was much older. And there was like 4 nights, and it was all these crazy movies. It was like Jurassic Park, Demon Knight. It was all this crazy stuff. I think it was at the Deer Lake Drive-In in West Lawn. I think that was in West Lawn. And that was like, I knew the manager, and he let me in, let my girlfriend and I in for free. Like we didn't have to pay. And I think we only saw like Jurassic Park and Demon Knight. And there were still 2 more after that because I had to get her home by a certain time. You know, when you're only like 17 or 18, you got to get home. Yeah. And that might have been the very last time that I had been to a drive-in. And my uncle even owned one up in, I think Miller's.
Wow.
Millersburg. Yeah, his family, uncle through marriage, owned one in Millersburg. So I actually have one of the radio like pieces from his drive-in.
Oh, cool.
And we you know, he's like, yeah, I want to go to the drive-in. And we're like, my brother and I were like, kind of over it. It was always a, you know, second or third run of something. We used to go to the Millersburg Theater. He co-owned that too. So we went and saw that, you know, went there a couple of times. But it wasn't until I saw the documentary on you guys.
Yeah.
And then we, you know, my wife and I did the math and we're like, that's not that far. And we're like, no, really not. And we had heard about you. And I think we watched it during the pandemic. We watched a documentary about you guys during the pandemic. And no. Actually, no. We had gone up there before that because my wife and I had actually gone up. Yeah, we watched documentary sometime, then went up. But we had gone up and saw, I think the first thing we did was we went up to one of your Planet of the Apes marathons.
Yes.
And really, we got as far as the second one, which sucks because we both love the third one, but she's like, I'm not going to make it. Like, she's like, I'm already falling asleep. And the third one is fantastic. Starts off as a great romantic comedy and then really just goes downhill as in like a horror film. But she's like, I don't, and she goes, emotionally, I don't know if I can sit through the third one either. So I was like, all right, I get it. So let's head back because it's still about a 2-hour drive.
Sure.
We did one of your, I think you did a Pee-wee and Beetlejuice weekend.
Yeah, the Tim Burton double.
Yeah, we did that. And then I remember going, I think the last thing we were at, and we had done one of the Camp Bloods or something like that.
Right.
And then I think the last thing we did before the pandemic was Batman Returns.
Yes.
Yeah, we went up and did that. And then after that, we were radio silent because we were all sitting in. And I think the first thing I did was the Dawn of the Dead on a Thursday.
Yes.
With my buddy Sean. He had actually flew back. He got out of LA before the pandemic really got bad and was staying here. He was like, you know, the world's going to end. I might as well be here with my friends and family and be closer. So he actually came back here, and then he and I went up to that.
Oh, how perfect! Oh, I love
we loved it. We had a great time. He's like, I've seen the documentary. I can't believe we're actually going. This is going to be fantastic. So then we went, and then my wife and I think the first time she had gone back up for Godzilla 85, which was my son's my oldest son's first drive-in experience. So we had hyped Godzilla the whole time. We had it on Pluto TV, so we had kind of understood what was going to happen. It was going to be this big monster. He was going to smash things. But when he got to blow the smoke out of your Godzilla there and everything, he was in heaven. It was the greatest thing ever. He had a good time. And then, like an idiot, I forgot to bring speakers, so we only had the tiny little speakers in the car going. He didn't care. He just thought it was great that this monster was smashing everything.
It's just magical for a
throughout
kid,
the city.
you know?
Yeah. So they had such a good time. So
well, that's so great. Yeah, it's one of those things, like, we are very similar in a lot of ways with how we kind of came to our positions and our theaters and all that, but definitely a crossover now because you're also a papa doing this thing. How many kids you got now?
I have two. I have two boys. My second son is going to celebrate his first birthday on Sunday. So he was actually at the drive-in for the Godzilla 85. So even though he was in the front seat asleep the whole time, his first drive-in was Godzilla 85.
Beautiful.
But my other son got to sit in the back. He thought that's great. He still talks about sitting in the trunk of the car watching the movie. And then he got to watch Cars on the way home because he didn't go to sleep. Even we thought
so
for
those
sure,
memories on to the next generation.
He'll pass out. We're like, he'll pass out. They'll move him in. He's like, he's watching Cars in the backseat on his iPad.
It's like he's going for a whole other movie.
Yeah. So it's fun, but I'm always like, my friends make a joke like, you guys are going to push movies on him. He's not, is he going to be a Star Wars guy? Is he going to like this or that? And I'm like, I have no idea. And I'm really just not going to push it. Like, he's going to like what he likes.
Yeah, that's the mode I'm in. I tell Mark all the time, like, Virgie's in this mode of, like, not wanting to go to the movies or not wanting to, be scared by something that jumps out,
Right.
unexpectedly. But yeah, it's that gradual over time. Just like us, we caught on to it when we caught on to it,
Yeah. Well, the one thing I always look at myself as being a dad now is that my dad, I don't want to say forced baseball on me. I really I played baseball. I like baseball, but I could not stand to sit at home and watch a baseball game on TV with my dad when I was younger. I was like, this is driving me nuts. It's boring. The post-game show. This is torture. And then somewhere around 2006, I was at a basketball game with my dad, and we were bored out of our mind. We got free tickets on the floor to 76ers. And I was like, Dad, we should just start going to Phillies games because I think you and I will have a lot more fun doing that. And then we went to Phillies games for 6 years.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? He forced baseball down my throat, and now I'm asking him to go to baseball. And I'm like, it's so away from the movie world. Yeah. And it's just to have that other thing that's relaxing. And I'm like, yeah, I get into it. If they do well, they don't do well. But I've come to appreciate, you know what? It's nice to just sit here with my dad, enjoy a baseball game. And we still talk about movies and all that other stuff. But he's telling me about players that I've never heard of. And I'm like, he's having a time of his life, and I'm getting here to spend time. So I'm like, maybe if I don't force the movies on him, he'll eventually be like, hey, what are you watching?
That's the move. See?
Yep. What is this? So he likes Sword in the Stone. He likes Cars 1, 2, and 3. He loves all the Toy Stories. So he's getting there eventually. But I'm just like, you know what? Just enjoy what you want to enjoy. And
certain things cross over. Like, I was obsessed with Ninja Turtles when I was his age, and he certainly caught that bug. Certain things just don't go away.
Yeah. Oh well, Mario is like.
Oh God. Yes.
We were bored, and he had pretty much beaten the Atari emulator thing I had bought. And you could tell he was bored. So I was like, you know what? The Super Nintendo is downstairs. I'm going to go downstairs and get him. I'm going to plug it in. And I'm like, well, he can't play this. He can't play that. This is a fight game. I don't need him just like beating up, Scorpion for 3 straight days. So I put in Super Mario, which I think only got to like round level 3 or something like that. And I'm like, here, put this in. And he's glued to it.
Yeah.
And he's trying to beat it. He's trying to figure it out. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, he's gotten further than I ever got.
Like a tear rolls down the eye.
Yeah, and I'm like, and thank God the movie came out like 2 years ago because the stuff is everywhere.
Yeah, it's like once that happened, it was
hats and lunchboxes and toys, and you're just like, he's like, can I get a Mario car? And you're like, yeah, sure, here you go. Like,
I love when it taps into like, your own fandom where you're like, well, yeah, I love that too. So of course.
Yeah. And thankfully, my wife she's 9 years younger than I am. And I'm like, do you know what's next on that level? She goes, oh yeah, you got to go around here and down there and then up there. Secret thing. I'm like, oh my God, really?
It's amazing.
I never even did that when I got it back in like 1993. I'm like, Jesus.
It all comes back around.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I could ask you questions. We could talk all day. I want to give
Sure.
Mark an opportunity to pick your brain as well,
Okay.
and talk a little bit about this amazing 1980s double feature that we're rocking together. What a perfect choice, by the way, of Dressed to Kill an Alligator.
I thought for a second there, I thought, well, this is kind of odd. Because I looked at so many of your others that you guys have been doing with the different theaters in the area and such. And I was like, you know what? I'm kind of seeing this as A picture, B picture.
Yeah.
And that's what the drive-in was. So I thought, you got Brian De Palma, you got Michael Caine, and then you have the, beautiful Nancy Allen, which when I was younger, I didn't think she was beautiful. And, it wasn't like, oh, that's not my time. Now I look back at Nancy Allen, I'm like, wow, what was I not seeing? Like, I watched 1941 and I'm like, yeah, Nancy Allen, what was I missing? But then Alligator, which is for me is amazing because that was a movie I discovered like on a Sunday afternoon, at home on a rainy day. Yeah. And I was like, what the hell is this with the guy from The Black Hole? And you're like watching this movie and I'm like, this just gets weirder and weirder. And then one day I was at a church white elephant sale and I bought the Alligator game.
Perfect.
And remember the Jaws one with the Jaws?
I had the Jaws game when I was a kid.
They had it for Alligator. It had a giant alligator in it. I mean, it was long. And whoever brought it in also had the box. Oh, God, I don't know what happened to it, but I regret whoever got, like my mom must have just got rid of it at a yard sale or something. And I wish I still had it because now I got the Alligator Blu-ray from like Scream Factory or something like that. I watched, I think, the extended cut or what a TV cut or something like that. I'm like, it holds up so well and it's so much fun. And I'm like, this is like, for me, these two movies were, one, I've always wanted to program Alligator, and two, it's the A and B picture, and that is the drive-in experience.
Yeah, and you would have seen that in 1980, like the
exactly
A and B.
And they were the same year. I almost called your event the 1980 drive-in or something like that.
Oh yeah, it's perfect.
Because it's perfect, So I really appreciate you guys coming in and doing these two films, and I just thought these two movies were just great. I mean, this is De Palma. I always think De Palma was good, and then just something like part of his brain fell out or something. It's just like his movies with like Snake Eyes, I believe, it's like Nicolas Cage. Doesn't like the endings just fall apart. But here, De Palma at this time is so much sharper. He's such a better storyteller. I don't know what it is, what fell apart. Is it like
De Palma, without a doubt?
I guess. I mean, I feel like it's also kind of like Marcia Lucas. Like, did the Marcia Lucas of his life disappear? Who was like editing his films? So George had to bring in other people and direct other things and do stuff so that he could get his movies made like a better way without Marcia. So I'm always wondering and questioning that, but. So sorry, I let you guys talk about the.
No. I mean, what's funny too is the flow of the night. That B picture is basically you're going to be watching Dressed to Kill, which is just super tense and edge of your seat and shocking, and then you let all of that tension dissipate and you watch a giant mutant alligator terrorizing the sewers and streets of New York City, and I think it was New York City. Was it L.A. or New York? I think it was New York, and it's just fun. It's just a giant monster movie. It's that old rumor or urban legend of people flushing going to Florida, bringing back a pet alligator that's tiny, and then they flush it down the toilet to get rid of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't die. It lives in the sewer on like nuclear waste or pharmaceutical waste or something, and it gets bigger and bigger.
Because I just watched the Blu-ray not too long ago. They were trying to do some sort of growth hormone to make certain animals bigger or something like that, and then they were flushing all of that down the toilet. Or it was some sort of dog food hormone or something. And then the alligator was eating those animals that were flushed or the carcasses that were flushed down the toilet or something. And then it got bigger because of that. It's something that has to do with like that. Discarded laboratory dogs. It says right on the thing.
And only Robert Forster can stop it.
And
Henry Silva may try.
Written by John Sayles.
Yes.
How does he write this in Piranha? And still come up with something like Matewan or something. You're just like
Matewan.
yeah, you're just like, what?
It was that Roger Corman New World Pictures filmmaking school, basically. All these people worked on these cheap movies that was a way to work on a movie, and eventually they wound up doing what they wanted to, which was stuff that's a lot classier than a giant alligator. But was it more fun than a giant alligator is the question.
Well, I mean, God bless Roger Corman. I mean, really. I mean, there's so much that he contributed to cinema. And I think he's just, like we have people like Ron Howard and Bill Paxton and James Cameron and, those guys. And, like, what if there was no Roger Corman? In some alternate universe, there is no Roger Corman. And we don't have James Cameron. I mean, say what you will about Avatar and those other things, but his other films that we've all loved and appreciate and what he contributed to cinema, that all starts with Roger Corman.
Who else would have given Richie Cunningham a shot at directing a feature film?
And no money, shoot on the back lot, and you're like, go make a film, kid, and that's it. And you look at these things, and you're just like, this is amazing. We wouldn't have Splash without Roger Corman. we wouldn't have,
Apollo 13.
Yeah, Apollo 13. We wouldn't have The Paper. By the way, watch The Paper. If you've not seen The Paper, when it initially came out, go back and watch it now. Man, is it timely. It's so good. My wife had never seen it. She goes, I skipped it. It didn't look like something. I'm like, you were a huge Batman 89 fan. Why would you just not go see it for Michael Keaton? She goes, I don't know. I skipped it. So I was like, all right, we're watching The Paper tonight. And amazing movie. I saw it when it came out in the theater. Did not appreciate it for it at the time. And now I absolutely love it. But Corman was the man. And I'm fortunate enough to have met him once. I was at Comic-Con and got to do some like roundtable interviews with Corman. And he was the most quiet spoken person I think I'd ever interview, to the point where I had to turn the volume all the way up to hear.
Whenever I would listen to an audio commentary that he did on a DVD or a Blu-ray, you couldn't walk out of the room because as soon as you did, you heard nothing because
his voice was just very, very calm and quiet.
It was like Harrison Ford, he's barely there, but such a nice guy, such a savvy businessman. And to hear the tales that Joe Dante will tell, or anybody who worked with him, of how he was like, the movie needs to be this long so that it'll fit in fewer shipping cans and be cheaper to ship. It has to have this amount of nudity, this amount of car crashes, and whatever else you do is up to you. And they had a wiggle room to make, a women in prison film and try to put other things into that they wanted to put in, social comment or do tributes to French New Wave or all kinds of crazy stuff that these film students basically who got the keys to the car from dad for a weekend, which might have been as long as it took to make some of those films. He was you never really think about it, but how much would we not have in film history if it wasn't for Corman?
Yeah. And it's just, it was so sad when he passed away. And I keep thinking about just that brief moment that I got to see him and talk to him and really short. And I just wish it wouldn't have been for Attack of the Giant Cheerleaders or something that he was promoting. And I was like, oh my God, can we just sit and talk to him without the two blonde girls who are in the cheerleading outfits here at Comic-Con? Can we just sit and talk to Roger Corman? Let's talk about The Intruder. Can we talk about that, please? Can we talk about something else? Was it The Forbidden World? I would have loved to have talked about. I think it's The Forbidden World. Talk about that instead, or Death Race 2000. So we actually had a Corman Fest on 16 millimeter back in November, I believe, or October.
Yeah, with Exhumed.
Yeah, and the one that got me was, I think it was student body nurses or something.
Student nurses.
I expected it to totally be a sleazy nudity picture kind of thing, with peepholes and all, that kind of student escapades and comedy and everything like that. And it actually was a really poignant film about women trying to succeed at their chosen careers and dealing with all the problems, things. I'm like, wait a minute, I thought we were watching these Corman movies. This actually has a really good message to it.
He always kind of insisted that there'd be some kind of social comment in those nurse movies, which you would never think, but social civil rights, social unrest, all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah. And oh God, who was in it? There was somebody in it that was so young, and I can't even remember who it was now. And I was like, oh my God, he's in all these other films, and he's super young, and he's the Shay from Evita kind of character. And I was just like, wow, I've never seen him with that much hair.
It wasn't Sid Haig. I know Sid Haig is in some of the women in prison movies, and it's weird to see him hair on the top of his head.
Oh, it was I think it was Rennie Santoni.
Oh yeah, yeah. He was in Cobra amongst a million other
Yeah,
things.
and for me, it's like he's one of the guys from like Brewster's Millions, and I've seen him in so many other things, but to see him there like super young, and it was just so weird because I was like, that's the great thing about cinema, that you can change your face. Some of these actors, they're younger, and they play a different part when they age. They get to a certain age, and they're now the dad or the grandfather or the older uncle, and they're older policeman. And that's what's so great about this medium, is that actors can change and play different parts. And as they get older, the roles change, and you really appreciate them at all different points of their career for what they're doing.
Right. So let's go over what this Mahoning Drive-In Road Show is beyond just a double, for anybody who's never been to one, which would be the majority of people because we only did 3 last year. Basically, we show up and Virgil and I will introduce the films. We will do a little talk about the history of drive-ins, the history of our drive-in and what we are, for those who don't know. And then we'll dig into like what you would do, introduce the 2 movies. Then we will go to a short pre-show reel, which would be drive-in ads, pick mosquito coil ads, the kind of things you would see at the drive-in, and they'll be culled from our collection, and some vintage trailers that are from vaguely the year of the movies that are going to play. Then we launch into feature number 2. We take a little bit of a break between the 2, an intermission, if you will, as we do at the drive-in, play a classic drive-in reel. Virgil and I'll be manning the Mighty Mahoning merch table with, we've got a tour shirt that's being designed for this, which looks like it's got all the dates on the back and some original art on the front. We'll have posters and merch and stuff like that.
Nice.
And then we will launch into the 10-minute drive-in intermission reel that we would see at the drive-in, 4 minutes till showtime. And then we'll go into feature number 2. So it's quite a night of entertainment at the movies. It's more than just 2 movies on the big screen. And it's $22 a ticket. And that's online now at, what's your URL there?
It's thecolonialtheatre.com. And we spell theater at the end. It's TRE, not ER. So we're a little bit
As I like to call it, theater.
Theater.
So that's talking about the road show. It's going to be a heck of a lot of fun. We hope everybody comes out to see that and to hang out. Part of the aspect, I always say get there early, because any Mahoning show is, and probably a lot of colonial horror shows too, a lot of it is the social aspect of it. It's people who love the same thing, people who want to talk about horror movies, who want to talk about drive-ins, who want to talk about 35 millimeter. The road shows we did last year, the entirety of the time that we weren't on stage or playing the movies, Virgil and I were talking to people, and it was so much fun. So hopefully people will get there early and do that, and in between the 2 movies, and of course buy a ton of popcorn and soda from the Colonial concession stand, which is gorgeous in that former bank building, those nice marble floors and those incredibly high ceilings. It's just every theater should be blessed with a concession lobby that big, so that people aren't just up in
Every
there.
theater should be blessed by the building next door that's for sale, and make it into a big concession area. We were so blessed to get that building. Now, I know that building next door, which is an old bar / like apartment building, is recently went up for sale and sold rather quickly, because we were all like, oh, we should pick that one up too. Like, do we have? We were like, no, we have no money for that. Like, we were like, oh, we could put in a B&B next to our theater. That would be fantastic.
We'd love to do the same thing.
Yeah.
That is one thing about Phoenixville. I mean, I've been to the last several of the 24-hour shows. There's really only like one hotel right close to the theater, and it doesn't have that many rooms, so it's always a wish. I mean, there are plenty of others that are not that far away. That's where I stay a little bit out of town, but it's 10 minutes maybe. But
I think it's funny that people actually get a hotel room, yet they're there for 24 straight hours to watch movies. So I guess they go back and crash and then come back. But there are other people who just fall asleep on like the floor outside. I'm going to call him out right now, because I never called him out on social media. His name's Grant Gow. I believe he works for Ambler. He actually fell asleep charging his phone on a chair in our lobby. And I took a picture of him during the 24-hour. And I was like, dude, just go home. Or just fall asleep in your chair. Like, why are you out here in the hallway?
I always say I'm in it to win it. I don't leave the theater except to get food. But I know some people will take a little bit of time to like go back to their room and shower. Or if a movie comes up that they're not interested in, they'll go back and sleep, a micro nap or a nap. Some just check out at some point and say, I'm going to get a good night of sleep. sleep and then come back and join for the rest. That's what my lady does. She goes, at some point she's had enough. She goes to the room, she gets a full night's sleep, and then she comes back and she still has like 8 hours of film watching left to go. So it's always fun with the 24-hour horror-a-thon to see how people go into it. Like some train like they're going into a marathon.
Oh
they're
my
like,
God, yeah.
I eat this way for so many days. I adjust my sleep pattern for this way so many days.
Yeah.
This is what I eat during the show to keep my energy up and not have to go to the bathroom as much. The first time I heard somebody talk about it, I was like, I'm not going to the moon with NASA. I just kind of want to watch movies.
There are people who show up. I think we had somebody at midnight last year show up to get a seat. Like he was outside in October waiting at midnight at the door for the next morning. And I was just like, wow, like really? There's 592 seats. Guess you really want to sit where you want to sit. And they have blankets and they have chairs and they're sitting out there and stuff. So that always amazes me. A friend of mine, when it used to be down at UPenn, was that where it was before? I forget where it was.
It was in Philadelphia. It was at the I House, and
yes,
that's attached to one of the colleges.
Yeah, it was at the I House. So a friend of mine, Joel Rickenbach, he went, and I was like, dude, what is that like? Because we were on a podcast together, and I was asking what it's like. And I was like, so like, yeah, popcorn, you have soda, do you have all these like high energy drinks and everything? He's like, no, it's the complete opposite. It's carrots, it's apples, it's granola bars. It's like, you don't want to have this huge sugar rush and then you'll crash. He goes, it's a marathon. It's a distance run. He's like, you gotta be water. You gotta, replenish your fluids, Gatorade, keep the fluids going and stuff. Get up and walk, take a exercise a little bit. If you've already seen the movie, take a break. So that's what I've used. That's what I've told a lot of people. I'm like, you may need coffee towards the end, but you've got to like pace yourself and be ready. You think you're going to do it on like 6 Red Bulls, you're going to kill yourself. Like that's not worth it. And you'll have a shitty time and you'll feel like shit the next day. Don't do that.
Now, speaking of the snack bar and the concession stand and consumption of things at a drive-in, if you were to go to a drive-in, what would be your go-to snack bar food?
Oh, well, I like the food that you guys have. You always have good hamburgers and hot dogs. Usually for me, that's what it is. Like I like hamburgers and hot dogs. Some of this more fancier movie theater food, I don't understand. I get everybody's got different tastes, but I like a nice bag of popcorn, no butter. I don't do the butter. I think that's another way to hurt yourself the next day. I like the hamburgers and hot dogs. I've had some of your goofier things, the themed food that you guys have done.
They can get out there sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, but I like a good hot dog at the drive-in, and I like popcorn instead of chips because you're at the drive-in, and a good Coke. Like, it's weird for me to drink alcohol at a movie. It doesn't register for some reason. Like, I don't think I go to the movie, I need a beer. For some reason, it doesn't do it for me. I don't understand why. The two things don't go hand in hand for some reason. So I like a good Coke, definitely a fountain drink. If I can get a fountain drink, a fountain Coke, cherry Coke, vanilla Coke, something like that, awesome. But for me, it's ever since the summer of 1982, it's Reese's Pieces and popcorn. Those are my two things. I got to have those two things. That's it for me. I don't make it overly complicated, and I like to have the things that I know that are definitely going to be at the movie theater, which is always Reese's Pieces and always popcorn, and then I'm never disappointed.
I have one more driving question, but before we get to, I want to talk about the gigantic jiggling creature in the room when we talk about the Colonial Theatre. You mentioned it briefly up front, but the Colonial Theatre in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania is inextricably, spell that one twice, linked with 1958's The Blob.
Yes, we are. So if you don't know, the Colonial Theatre is the movie theater from The Blob. So when everybody comes running out under that movie marquee, that is our marquee, and it looks like that now. We have not changed it. I believe the neon colors are slightly different, but all you got to do is just go under Giphy and just type in Colonial Theatre or The Blob, and it'll be like the first or second when it comes out. So The Blob itself was filmed in the Phoenixville area by Valley Forge Studios, which was also called, I believe, Good Time Productions. It was filmed in the area. Jack Harris, who was an LA producer, hired the studio to film his movie, and it was shot in the area, used a lot of locals, but Steve McQueen was hired. It's considered his first movie, but he had another movie that I believe came out in black and white right before it, so it's kind of a gray area, like what he filmed first, what actually came out first. It's two different things. They were using the theater itself to watch dailies and work things out. So then they made an offer to the owner at the time for $75 to rent the theater out to shoot interiors and exteriors. He thought this was insulting. He did not want this. He was like, $75? Really? You guys are like, this studio's going to release, Paramount's going to release this film and all these other things. So he was kind of insulted. And the producer, Jack Harris, who was a real showman kind of guy, said, don't worry, I'll make it immortal. And he did. He made a movie that has stood the test of time, and people like love it. It's charming. It's sweet. I think it has a really good message about people coming together and standing together to make a difference, especially young people at the time where movies were more like, saw young people more like Rebel Without a Cause, where the kids were always juvenile delinquents. Here, the kids are telling the truth. Nobody believes them. They have to prove that this thing exists before just like the police officers actually will stand by them. And then, when they actually see it, they're like, oh, wow, the kids know what they're doing. What do we do now? And the police officers who were at first some of their adversaries in the film are now like they're standing right next to them and trying to make a difference. So I really like that message. They filmed exteriors, interiors. They also filmed on 3rd and Bridge Street, which is the doctor's house, which you can go see. It's a private residence, but it's a gorgeous mansion. The doctor's like house / office. And then some of the other locations have since disappeared. The garage is gone. It was here in Phoenixville. And then the grocery store, that there's a big scene where they figure out, or Steve McQueen figures out that the cold can actually keep it at bay or hurt it. That grocery store is now like a Dollar Tree. So there's a couple other little tiny spots here and there, but you can come to our balcony and stand where Steve McQueen stood and talk to his friends, and then stand outside where he's standing in front of this makeshift weird robot versus the vampire, which is really just a Forbidden Planet poster changed a little bit, outside under our marquee. So we are the theater, and you can see the movie itself and be in the theater where it actually all happened. And there's not many movies that you can watch and do that with inside of the same theater. So it's a really cool experience. And then every July we celebrate Blobfest. Why July? Because July is when the movie takes place. If you look at the calendar in the police station, it says July 1957. So we are planning in the early stages right now of planning Blobfest 26 in 2025. Blobfest 26, and we're going to call it Camp Blobfest, and we're going to do campy films. There are 2 films where actually there's camping taking place, but most of the films are going to be very campy, as in kind of tongue-in-cheek, fun films. Try to keep it very family-friendly for Blobfest.
And Blobfest is a wildly popular event. We're open when you're open at that time of year. So a lot of people are like, I can't make it. It's Blobfest. And I'm like, I got no beef with that. Blobfest rules. Blobfest is amazing. And you do the recreation of running out of the theater. Everybody's screaming like maniacs. You've got there's a parade. There's a Miss Blobfest. I mean, there's a lot to this. It's not just films on the big screen.
The films themselves are kind of like the showcasing of the theater or the movie itself. And then we have a bunch of other goofy films that we partner with or pair it with. But we actually removed Miss Blobfest last year. We stopped doing it. We decided to we were trying to actually do, hopefully this year we can make it come to light. We wanted to do a like spotlight of 2 young people like in the film, and then try to like say, these are 2 people in our community that have contributed or donated their time or something like that. So we're still working out the details for spotlighting 2 young people, which is more in line with the film. But then we also have a short film contest. And then we have all other kinds of like goofy things. Some years we have a tinfoil hat contest where people design tinfoil hats so that they can't read our brains. So we do have other funny, silly things. The short film contests are getting better and better every year. It's kind of crazy what people can do with their computers now. And we kind of have to like pull back and be like, is this on the same level as somebody who does a stop motion clay movie? So we've actually had to create separate categories now for under 18, over 18, and then now animated. So it's getting, every year there's always a new facet. We always learn something we never learned the year before. Since I've been with it, since I've been doing Blobfest since like 2008 or I think 2008, it always amazes me as like, well, we never thought of that. This year we sold out of t-shirts. Well, how many did we order? We're double that next year. And, then we sell out of that. So you're like, how far can you go?
Always a learning process.
It's always a crazy thing. And it's funny because as we get new staff members, they suggest things and you want to be, we shouldn't do a shirt that's black. And you're like, okay. And then we don't sell all those shirts. And you're like, well, why didn't we sell all the shirts? Because they weren't black. And it's one of those things where, well, did you sell black shirts before? You sold every one. You're like, every single one. But as you guys know, how many black t-shirts can you have?
Oh, yeah.
You're like, oh my God, another black t-shirt. You're like, how many of these black t-shirts do I own? It's one of those things where we try to come up with new merch as you guys do. And I will honestly say I ripped off the popcorn bucket idea from you guys after I was up there. And I was like, that's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that? So we had popcorn buckets. We still do ever since I saw them up at the Mahoning. So it's one of those things where you got to go other places, see what works, see what doesn't work. And you're like, yeah, we could adapt that. We could change that. It's always a fun learning process. Blobfest is that. It always is. We've already started looking at ideas and themes for Blobfest 2026, as well as Blobfest 2027, which is the year that the film was actually made. So we're talking about the anniversary of the production of the film. And then 2028 is the 60th or 70th anniversary or something like that.
Yeah.
70th anniversary. So there's not many people left. Last year we had one woman who was actually in the run out. She came with her grandchildren and stuff we actually had 2 runouts last year. We actually had a Friday night run out and a Saturday night run out, and both were sold out.
Amazing.
So we've actually said, okay, well, we thought, we'll roll the dice and see if people want to do another run out. They want to do another run out. So the Friday night one is they get the stage show. They get to see the short films that win. Friday night show is more media coverage, like all the different local news stations come out and everything and cover it. But the Saturday night one was just right before the sun went down. It had a nice light to it and everything. And people came out and they watched it all happen again. And we closed the street down. Like there's no vendors at that point. So the streets are still closed and everybody still runs out and has a really good time. And it's insanity. It's crazy. And then they all come back in and they watch Blob 88 this year. So, which surprised me how many people had never seen the remake.
It's good.
It is good. It is good. And you guys did the remake double take during the pandemic, and that was fantastic. I still have that poster.
So the last question I have that we ask all of our guests, if you could program a night or weekend at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, regardless of the financial ruin that might result by those ideas, what would you play?
Well, see, I thought, and I'll be honest, I thought this was a tricky question, how you guys can get like new ideas for things. And I was like, I can't give you the 2 or 3 that I haven't done yet. So, I'm like, because, it's one thing to ask somebody who's not a film programmer, what would you do? And you're like, I got like 6 or 7 ideas and I'm still trying to make it happen. So I had to come up with I gotta come up with something.
Like decoy answers that you're going to give
them. Not even
like
a decoy answer.
You're like, I think these would be great. We're going to sink that ship.
I'm gonna, yeah. Titanic, Raise the Titanic, and then Poseidon Adventure. That would be perfect. So I thought of one that I would love to do, but I probably couldn't sway some of the people that I work with. Like, yeah, we should do this. It'd be great, And like, I would love to see this, and that's what I thought. I was like, all right, I'll come up with something that I would do if I got to do it at the Mahoning. So I wrote an article years ago when Charlton Heston passed away about that. Charlton Heston literally died for humanity, or tried to save what was left of humanity, like in 3 films. And I thought, what a triple feature that would be. So it would be Planet of the Apes, Soylent Green, and Omega Man.
Come on.
And great triple.
And it's just like at every turn in Planet of the Apes, he goes looking for a better thing that's in the universe than man. He wants to find something better, and there really is nothing better, and he's got to be better to save Nova and himself. He's got to be better and get through this. And Soylent Green, he's just trying to find an answer as to why and what does this all mean, and what is the mystery. And then he finds out, and he just wants to tell the world that we're basically eating ourselves, that there's nothing left. And then in Omega Man, he literally dies to save humanity. So, I mean, those are 3 films that I was like, these were like 3 of my favorite sci-fi movies that whenever they were on, literally the world would stop. Like my dad would come in and go, Planet of the Apes again, huh? He's like, yeah, right. Okay, fine. But like the first time he showed that movie to me, he goes, wait till you get to the end. And I was like, what do you mean wait till you get to the end? He goes, I'll be back. I want to watch your face.
Just good parenting right there.
Yeah, I'll be back. I want to see what happens. So there's also, and for the drive-in, this would be great. If you guys can find, it's on YouTube, Charlton Heston actually is like in, I think, almost like a tracksuit or a tennis jumpsuit. And he's walking towards the camera and talking about what the MPAA ratings mean now. So if you have it, if you have it and can run it, it's like the perfect night of Charlton Heston movies. And then you'd have this like, well, a G-rated movie, you know, and you go through the whole Heston thing. So that would probably be what I would want to do, is basically like a tribute to Charlton Heston with those three films.
Hell yeah, Heston to the rescue. I can see the t-shirts now.
There you go. And well, I love Omega Man. And that was a movie where I was like, this is amazing. And my dad was like, yeah, they're all vampires, and tell me the story. And then I go and watch it and I'm like, where's the blood sucking in this? Like, there's no vampire. So he was combining the book and the movie and selling me on the idea. So then when I actually went and read the book, I was like, oh, this makes more sense now. I guess they just cut out the vampire thing because they were only there at night. So that's kind of an interesting update on the whole like story and stuff. So it was fascinating to me how my dad would spin some of these movies to see it. And he goes, oh, Soylent Green. And he goes, ooh, oh, it's people. And I'm like, what? He goes, never mind. And then he would like leave. And,
forget it.
You know, and then I'm like, all right, I got to sit through this. And I'm like, what is that? You know, and I'm just like, what? He's like, oh yeah, you got to watch Omega Man next. I'm like, what? Wait, what? I got to watch what? And then, you know, they tell me.
It just informs us. I'm telling you, I'm doing the same thing to my Munchkin. I'm sure you're going to be in that or on that same page with your Munchkins.
Oh, I feel bad because his mother and we talk in movie talk at times, and he just looks at us like, gives us like a look, and then he'll repeat something that we'll say, and then my wife will go, now, call Boris Karloff, and then she'll stop, and then she'll look at me, and then we don't say the rest of the line from Ed Wood because we know we'll get there someday. Someday.
Yeah.
But we love doing that. And now he's talking in movie talk, but we don't know Cars 1, 2, and 3 as well as he does, or the 3 Toy Stories. So we're just like, wait, is he quoting Toy Story? Like, oh, we got. Like so he'll start doing Sword in the Stone, and we're like, he's doing Sword in the Stone. Like, oh my God. Like,
it all comes around.
We know what he's saying, but wow, where is that coming from? So
well, Bob, we can't thank you enough for making the time, your partnership, your support, your love, and obviously everything that you do to push the area forward and promote this amazing landscape of theaters that we have going on in the area. So thank you so much for all you do.
Well, thank you guys. And it's nice to have another place that I can go to just hang out and not work. Yeah. Besides going to a baseball game. But it's nice to have you guys having that experience, like what the drive-in is. And, you know, I knew it, I remembered it, and then to go and experience it with you guys. And you know what, if you haven't been to the Mahoning and you're planning it, you're listening to it, and you're from the Colonial and you're checking this out or whatever, it really is a great throwback evening event of just going there and just embracing movies and having a good time. And everybody at Mahoning is so nice, and it's so open. You literally walk right in the production room and just say hi to these guys, you know, and you can look at the film prints, and, you know, you can talk to Rob and Krista and the projectionists and ask questions. And it's such like, it feels like almost like going to a beach party sometimes, because we're just all hanging out. The movie starts and we have such a good time. And I love going. I wish I could go more, but as the kids will get older, this will become more of a thing. Like, we're already talking about going to your Wizard of Oz, Willy Wonka.
Yes,
evening.
Absolutely.
So my son loved the Wizard of Oz. We watched that at the Colonial last June, and my wife and I were like, well, I guess maybe we could get him to go to the drive-in. So that would give us a reason to go up.
That's what's exciting. It's like he will progress along with you. It'll be like, oh, This is our tradition. Then he's like, hey, can I go to Zombie Fest with you guys? You never know.
Well, it's weird because I don't know if you guys are like this with your kids, but I have such a large collection of horror t-shirts that from doing stuff at the Colonial for so long, I don't wear them anymore. Yeah. And it's weird. I'm like, well, they're preserving them so that one day I'll be able to wear them. They're not fading. But the stuff that he finds scary isn't really that scary. But then he'll be like, oh, Daddy's got a zombie shirt on. And like, I forget that it's on, or I take a sweatshirt off and it's there. And he knows what it is. It's a zombie, you know? And I'm like, we got, you know, all this other stuff up around the house. And You know, I gotta watch it when my mother-in-law comes in or something like that to make sure I don't have a zombie thing. I did want to congratulate you guys, and I didn't get to say anything about being in Box Office Pro with you guys last October, November of 2023. I know we got on the cover, but when I opened it up and then I saw that you guys were in there with us, I thought, you know what? That's really cool of us in PA that out of the 5 places that you should go to watch horror films, 2 of them are within driving distance of each other.
That is pretty amazing.
And it was us. And I thought that was such a cool, fun experience. And to have that for us was just amazing. And then I reached out to get more copies of the article, of the magazine and stuff. And the man who wrote it, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, Chad Krennick. He said, you know, it's the most requested copy we've had in a long time.
Amazing.
So I thought that was pretty cool that we were all trying to get copies of that. Because you couldn't go to a Barnes and Nobles and buy it. You know, you had to get it right from them, and they sent us 4 more copies. So I wish we could have got more. So we just leave them around the theater, you know?
Yeah. We'll let the people know listening where they can go to follow you guys and keep their finger on the pulse.
We're on all the social channels. We're the Colonial Theatre, colonialtheatre.com. We're on Instagram. We're on X. We're on Facebook. And you can just follow us there. We have pulled back on the Fright Night shows as of late. I've had bad experiences in the winter time where we get this like really cool 35 millimeter print and then it blizzards. Yes. And then we're stuck with that. So we're kind of pulling back a little bit, but for January for sure. And then in February, we've got Alligator with this big event that we're doing. And then we also have Exhum's coming in and is doing The Stand with Mick Garris.
Yes.
On February 8th. So we're going to have that event. And we actually pulled back our Horror Bowl this year because of Mick Garris's event being the day before. And, you know, you guys know, you don't want to have 2 of the same events and you're asking people to compete and you're competing against yourself.
Yes.
You know? You're like, why do you want to do that and you want to kind of give people a break sometimes. But I've had so many people ask about Horror Bowl, and that was our Super Bowl Sunday event where we did 3 horror films with a theme. And this year we had it all ready to go. And then I got the word from Mick that he was coming. And I'm like, you know what? I've wanted Mick Garris since the pandemic. And then asking. And he actually recorded a opening for our Hocus Pocus screenings for us.
Awesome.
Like, and just sent it out. And he's like, hi, I'm Mick Garris. And I wrote this film, you know, and just started, welcome to the Colonial Theatre. And we still run it. We've been running it ever since. We will show
Hocus Pocus
every year. And he greets everybody. Hi, I'm Mick Garris. So to have him come, you know, him, and then I would love to have, you know, like Joe Dante or something like that before. These guys are like, I'm too old to travel. You know, I'm like,
I know, it's so hard. So hard.
So we're there. And if you want to follow me, I'm the Movie Lord on Instagram. And I usually post a lot of things going on at the Colonial or weird things that I find at the Colonial sometimes. Like, hey, look, I found this chair and it was underneath our mezzanine. You know, weird things. This is an electric box. We
Random
don't know how old it is. It does these buttons do anything?
Well, that's the stuff people love. It's about the history of the theater and all aspects.
Yeah, and we do tours. So if you ever want to come and visit the theater, sometimes we have official tours with our local historian. Other times, some of the staff members will just like, you tell us a sob story that you drove like 2 hours to get there, and one of us will walk you around really quick.
You got our hearts.
The one thing that we did not mention is we actually have a theater organ, and we do the organ shows with silent films the majority of the time, but there are times that you can come to the Colonial. Certain films, we will have an organist play beforehand. Jaws, It's a Wonderful Life. Coming up, we have Casablanca at the end of January, where somebody will play the organ about 30 minutes before the movie starts. You can actually get a sense. And it's a 100-plus-year-old organ and a 120-plus-year-old movie theater. It's a fantastic experience. And we're in the 35 millimeter, we are in the 2% of places that still have a working theater organ. We can't even do the math on the movie theaters that still have a working organ.
Insane.
It's so much smaller. Like I can think of like the El Capitan out in LA. I know they have one. Other than that, I'm like, I don't know who else still has
scratching heads.
It's
preserving the cinematic history that's in the area, and you guys have such a rich history. And I love the fact that you lean into it. You do everything for the fans that love it. It's just a beautiful thing. For the people listening, do your cinematic soul a favor and get out to the Colonial and experience it. Hey, and now you have the perfect excuse on February 20th as you come through for the perfect 1980 double feature with Dress to Kill and Alligator. Bob, thank you again. We can't thank you enough just for everything that you do. And anybody listening to this, it'll be so clear the love and passion that comes through in your work.
Thank you, Virgil and Mark. It was a pleasure talking to you guys. Where I felt like I was sucking up your time when you're at the drive-in, because I always feel like you guys have to go do something. Because that's how I feel. Like I'm like, people want to come up and talk to me, and I'm like, I got to do like 20 million things like right now. And okay, yeah, like I listen to your story. I always feel like I don't want to suck up your time because I've been in your shoes, and it's just nice to just hang out and chat.
It's always nice
about stuff. So especially people in the business, because there's so few of us at times, and I think there are times we're competing against each other, and then you don't want to give away too much stuff of what you've got coming up, and it's just a weird kind of relationship that we all have, that we're competing and not competing, and at the same time it's like, hey, there's nobody else doing what we're doing, so we've all got to work together.
That's right, we're in a world all our own.
Yeah.
And as we say often, if you guys do the work and put the effort in to go and find that fun, I'm telling you, your life will be that much better for it. And again, to all you guys out there, be sure to follow the Colonial on all the fun stuff that they are doing. And on that note, Jeff, take it away, my friend.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for coming out tonight to the Mahoning Drive-In Theatre. We hope you'll come back and see us again real soon. The exit is on the right-hand side of the screen at the front of the field. And most importantly, have a very safe trip home. Good night and God bless you.